All right, so I got a keyboard update for you, Jobulig.
I'm excited.
I sent you a picture on Friday night, I think it was, because what I do for fun on Friday nights is take apart keyboards. So I did keyboard surgery Friday night, and my Keychron K8 now no longer has Gatoron Browns, now has the drop version of the Holy Panda switches, which are very nice.
People love those things. Like the mechanical world is all about them and love them. And I've never had my sticky fingers on them yet, so I'm anxious.
They're pretty cool. In fact, after I had switched them out, Toby walked in and he heard me typing on it. He's like, "What'd you do? That sounds way better." Like, well, it feels way better too, but
Sure.
it just sounds more chunky.
They're tactile, right?
Yep, they're tactile. So the Browns were tactile too. They don't have that actual click, but you still have the feeling of kind of a clicky switch,
Right.
without all the noise. I've got keycaps coming. Actually, 2 sets of keycaps coming.
What? Mike.
Well, keycaps are keycaps are a whole nother world.
Yeah, they are.
And I don't understand this world at all. I've been trying to do research because if you want to buy keycaps, you have to get in on these group buys, and then like 40 days later, the group buy goes through, and then like a year later, you get your switches. Is generally how it goes. Or you buy cheap stuff off of Amazon, which I am a little bit nervous about. I'm sure you can find decent stuff there, but what I wanted are thick PBT style switches, or I'm sorry, keycaps. The ones that come with the Keychron are ABS, and so they just don't quite feel right. And since I got nice switches underneath them now, I really want some nice PBT keycaps.
Yep.
Keychron actually makes a PBT set for the K2, but it is out of stock, and so I've been looking high and low for a good set of keycaps for less than $150 that are available now.
Yes. Because that's how this goes.
Yeah.
In the world of custom keycaps, like you're just going to spend money on them. You just are.
Yep. So I was watching Mike Hurley stream his keyboard breakdown, all of his different stuff that he's got.
Sure.
And he's got these keycaps with these, I think they're Japanese legends on them, which are from a company called Melgeek.
Okay.
And I came across that set of keycaps in my research. And I'm like, hey, these look familiar. And then asked Mike, are these the ones you got? He said, yeah. They have another set called the Big Bone, I believe, which look like they're not quite so pointed at the top. They're kind of like flat, but they also are sculpted, so it's not like banging on a piece of glass.
Sure.
And they were fairly reasonable. They're coming from China, I think, but they were like $60. They are now in the US, so hopefully they will be to me shortly.
All right. You should try hunting down custom keycaps for a Dvorak layout.
Oh, yeah, I know, because a lot of like the group buys some of them will have Dvorak layouts. Most of them will not. Most of them also will not have Mac legends, so the command keys, for example. So this Melgeek set actually has a Mac kit, but that part was sold out, so I don't have that. I just have those keycaps coming.
Sure.
Then I saw another one which looked really intriguing. It's an SA profile, so like really high and really sculpted. Looks like little recliners for your fingers if you look at it from the side. And there's a set called the SA Granite from the Kono store, which is one of the places I found. Like that's one of the places that you get good keycaps from.
Sure.
And that one was on sale. It was a group buy that I guess they had some production issues, and so a bunch of people like canceled their orders or something. I don't know, but they had some available, and there's movement on the project now finally. So I have a set of those coming as well.
Oh, Mike. Yeah, in the world of Dvorak, like trying to locate these things is almost impossible. I shouldn't say that, but like you can get these rehoming keys sometimes, and it depends on Like the keyboard I use is a DOS keyboard, and the height of each of the keys front to back for each row is different. So you can't just move the keys around to get the different layout. You have to get it custom printed for that layout.
Exactly.
To make it work.
Unless you got like a DSA set or something, right, where it's all flat.
Yeah. Unless you get some where they're all the same, which isn't that many, because usually they have a profile on them to some degree. So most of the time that doesn't work. But sometimes they'll send you, like, you can get these add-on kits that will have the keys that need to move only.
Exactly.
They'll get those sometimes, but you're always going to spend a little bit more. The last time I located a set of keycaps that I would actually use on a keyboard, it was going to cost me like $140 just to get the keycaps that I needed. So I have not been down that road. I'm also, the other problem is I love full-size keyboards. Like, people love these 65% or the 10 keyless keyboards. Like, I use that number pad all the time. So it's just weird to me that people don't want that.
That's going to be a deal breaker for sure.
That's hard. Like, it gets very difficult to locate things for that. But the other thing, too, is, like, I have debated from time to time just doing the QWERTY keyboards and then putting stickers on top of them, which is what I do for my MacBook Pro, because it like can't swap those keys around without destroying them. So I do that. So I've debated doing that on a mechanical keyboard, but that's strange to put stickers on a keyboard with nice keycaps.
That is. It's a bridge too far, methinks.
It is. It seems strange. So yes, if I were to try to get an aluminum keyboard with like Holy Pandas with the Dvorak layout, I cannot get it done for less than about $450.
Jeez.
I can't get it done. So, not that I've been able to locate. So, it's a mess. This is the problem with going Dvorak.
Yeah. Well, I posted the links to the two sets in the chat for people who want to take a look at these. But I guess I'm all in on this rabbit hole. Now I'm trying to limit it to just this keyboard, and I think I can do that.
Yeah, right.
Because this is
how
Bluetooth.
It starts, Mike.
Yeah, well,
I'm just gonna buy one fountain pen for this one.
Yep.
How many do you have now?
But I do like to have the same tools available to me everywhere. And I view my keyboard as a tool. It's like, it feels like home. It's kind of like on a lesser level, like using a different Mac would drive me crazy because everything's not exactly where I want it.
Right.
That's kind of how I am with this keyboard at the moment. And I like the fact that I can use the same keyboard and it feels exactly the same whether I'm writing in Ulysses on my Mac or writing in Ulysses on my iPad.
Sure.
And I got this iPad stand that, like, that's kind of my upstairs when I want to get out of my office working setup now. And the Mac just pretty much stays plugged in the office all the time.
Yeah.
Since I don't really go anywhere.
I will say, like, I type on the MacBook Pro itself a decent amount away from my mechanical. So I'm grateful that they changed off of the butterfly nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm grateful that they did that. But it's one of those things that once you go, I feel like once people go to a mechanical, it seems rare that they come back.
Yep. Agreed.
So there's something to that. I know that some people love the clicky versions, like if you know them, like the blue and the green MX Brown or MX Cherry MX switches. So some people love those. To me, they're just obnoxious. But the linears are strange because there is no bump and you bottom out on them all the time. So it's just strange. So
yep.
I tend to go for the tactiles, which I think you tend to as well. That's pretty common for people. So if you want to get started in mechanical keyboards, I suggest going with brown versions of just about anything because those are the tactiles.
Yep. But enough about keyboards.
This is similar to fountain pens. We can just go and go and go and go.
It's true. I have one other announcement that I have to make, and that is that as this episode airs, there will be a new course that I have helped create for the Sweet Setup called Calm Inbox. It is a pretty ambitious course. Basically, what we did is we took the perspective and the approach, like the productivity type stuff. That's modules 1, 2, and 3, like all the mindset stuff on how to handle just about any email message that could land in your inbox. And then we have a section called the Vault where we created screencast videos. So there is altogether 52 different videos in this course, I believe. And it's a lot. So like in the actual modules, we'll explain stuff like setting up email rules, which if you have been around email for a while, maybe that part seems pretty basic. But if you're coming new to it, like that's kind of revolutionary. We talk through like our approach to mobile email and triaging, custom swipe gestures and stuff. And then in the Vault, we walk through how to set up custom swipe gestures in like all the different popular email clients. So it's they support each other, but they're separate. So like one side is all like the technical, here's how you do the things, and then the other part is like the talking head type videos where we walk through all the process and the system. And the big takeaway from a lot of this stuff that's kind of revolutionary for some people is the belief that every email that lands in your inbox, you don't have an obligation to do something with it. And so we try to teach in the course like the mindsets that go behind that. You know, I've said over and over again that email is a to-do list that other people can write on. And so once you make that switch, and that's where a lot of like the talking head videos come in, is like kind of explaining how you can get to that point. Because if you work in a corporation, for example, maybe you have an email culture where you feels like you can't push back against that kind of stuff. But ultimately, that's the thing you have to do in order to start creating some calm in your inboxes. You got to change the rules. If you just go with the defaults, you're going to be stressed out and overwhelmed all the time because you're just going to keep getting more email.
Do you talk about the Hey service in this?
We do. Yep.
Okay. Because I'm conflicted about Hey. In that, like, I love what they're doing from like you have these different areas and we're going to help you process it into those. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't work that way. So like I personally struggle with it. I know that it works for some, but I think it works well for people who don't think this way. So I think there is some of that. So I'm very curious to see how this, I need to go through this, Mike, because I'm curious how you guys cover some of this.
Yeah, feedback has been pretty great so far from like the beta testers that have gone through some of the stuff. I'm excited as we're recording this. It's launching tomorrow. So I'm always a little bit nervous prior to the launch, but it's going to be fun. And like all the courses at the Suite Setup, the first week when it's launched, there's a 20% discount. I did actually set up an additional coupon for Focused, which we can use for this podcast too. So if you go to the suitesetup.com/focused, then that will get you an additional 10% off of whatever the price happens to be when you go there. So if you get this in the first week, 20% discount. So normally $99, now $79. That 10% will be taken off of the $79 price. If you go later, you can still get a discount even after the launch window. So
cool.
Put a link to that in the show notes for people who want to check it out.
Sweet.
It's been a labor of love. I've been working on this for several months. Kind of along with this was a review I posted of the best iOS email app on the Suite Setup, which, I mean, you want to get people angry. Pick one email app to recommend.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
So did that. We also created like this email quiz, which has a lot of technical wizardry behind it. Big shout out to Isaac Smith for helping me get all of that set up. But it's pretty cool. You basically go through, and I have this whole big like flowchart I created in Keynote of like the different breaking points for how I would advise people like this. You should check out this app. And so it's this complicated chart that goes all over the place. And then in the end, you answer 5 or 6 questions, and it gives you a recommended result and a couple reasons why. And then if you want a sample video from the course, you fill out the form and you get one via email. That was a lot of fun to make, and it's been really cool to see the response to that. And I was worried about that too when I launched it. I'm like, we put so much work into that thing. If no one likes it, like it's a complete waste of time. Which
Sure.
ultimately at the end it recommends an email app, and that's kind of the big takeaway. Like you don't have to fill out the form to get the video. We're not hiding anything behind there. It's like if you want the video, you can get it, but you can get really the value of the result of the quiz without having to give us anything, which I thought was kind of cool.
Those quizzes are always interesting too. It's very difficult to get all the steps and the results.
Well, exactly. It's not just a quiz. It's not like you answer the question and you get points based on what answer you pick.
Sure.
It's literally a giant logic tree. It's a bowl of spaghetti that leads you to the right email client finally.
And every time you add a question, it doubles the logic results.
Yes. So one of the answers is like Spark plus SaneBox.
Yep.
There's a separate answer for just Spark. And there's another answer for Spark plus Teams. And then there's also like Airmail and Hey and Apple Mail, all that type of stuff. But just taking like Spark plus SaneBox, there's 10 different ways in the logic tree to get to that response. And there's 10 different responses. So you can kind of get an idea for how big this thing is.
Enormous. That's what it is. Enormous.
Yep. So link in the show notes. The quiz is actually in the iOS email app article if you want to check that out. But that's all related to Calm Inbox as a long way of saying that this has kind of been my work life for the last several months. And I'm really excited to share it with everybody.
Cool. Fun times. You got another point of follow-up here, though.
I do. Finally getting to follow up for action items. And this one I failed at. My action item from the last episode was to find someone radically different and befriend them. I made the distinction that I wanted it to be somebody new. I really haven't gone anywhere to find somebody new to befriend, and I've been so heads down on this product. As you know, launches are always crazy. This one has actually gone really well in terms of the production and everything, but still tidying up everything at the end, there's always stuff to do. So when we recorded last, I estimated that I would have a little bit more margin than I did the last couple of weeks. So this is an epic fail. I made an effort to reach out to somebody, but they reached out to me first, so that doesn't even count, I don't think.
No, does not. I'm not going to give you that one.
No, I'm not asking for it. I'm admitting I didn't do this. So I do think there's value in this, and I do want to continue to do this. But the more I think about this too, it's not an action item where it's like I'm done with that, and now like I'm good. This is something that I'd like to influence my perspective going forward. So hopefully I find many more people who are radically different and befriend them.
Cool. I hope it goes well for you.
Thank you.
I feel like I have a lot of friends that I do not agree with, so I'm not going to continue to seek out more of those. I love you all, but
fair enough.
No.
All right, then we should probably jump into today's book, which is How to Be Everything by Emilie Wapnick. This is a book about being a multipotentialite, which we will unpack here in a moment. I first heard about this book from Jay Miller, and it was not quite what I expected in both a good way and a bad way. The first part of the book, I really got more out of it than I thought I was going to. The last part of the book, I was kind of disappointed by. And we'll jump into those different sections as we go here. But the format of the book is that there are 3 sections, as you do.
What? Really? When did that happen?
Yeah. So part 1 is everything with a question mark. Part 2 is the 4 multipotentialite work models. Part 3 is the common multipotentialite stumbling blocks. And then just kind of like a final word for the conclusion, which I added to the outline because I do think there's a really strong ending to this book. So 10 different chapters, I believe. We're not going to go through each chapter. I kind of pulled out some of the main ideas from these different sections, and I think we'll tackle these part by part.
Okay.
So the first part, number 1, everything. The first thing we need to do here is define what is a multipotentialite. You want to take a crack at describing it in your own words before I share the formal definition?
Sure, because the way to think about it is a potentialite would be someone who sees an endeavor and you can see the potential of that endeavor to become something bigger. So, if you want to explore that from a practical stance, a multipotentialite would be someone who sees the potential for a blog to be something that they love to do. You could also see how woodworking would be something that you would love to do. You could also see how being a plumber would be something you love to do. You get my point. Like, there's a lot of these different interest areas that you think could be something that you do longer term. And thus, the potential part of that, the multi being you have a bunch of these, and the light at the end of it, the ite, mean you are that person. So a multi-potentialite, someone who has a lot of interest, and you can see the potential for each of those interests to be something bigger.
Nice.
How'd I do?
I like it. I like your definition better than hers, I think, because a multi-potentialite is someone with many interests and creative pursuits. And I think one of the things that you mentioned that I liked is the ability to see like what that thing could become. And I think there's an inherent bias in that, which is okay, towards a work perspective, where the ability to become something that could provide for you and your family financially, as an example.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple different elements of a multi-potentialite life. Maybe this is the time to talk about these real quick. So this is later on in the third chapter, but the three common elements in a multi-potentialite design life are money, meaning, and variety. And these are pretty straightforward. Money, we need money, but the amount will vary, but it's just one ingredient to a happy life. Meaning, why do you do what you do? And then variety, I think, really is the thing that kind of stands out with multi-potentialites, because if you don't have variety, then you get bored. If you have too much variety, you can be overwhelmed. And so the basic idea for every multi-potentialite is to recognize that there is more than one facet to the question, what do you do? And how do you combine those in a way that scratch all the itches?
Yes. So I guess a question there is, do you feel like you fit this, Mike?
I do. We're going to talk about that in a little bit when we talk about the different kinds. But yes, I do. And one of the things that kind of cemented this for me is the discussion in chapter 2 about the 10,000 hours from, that's Outliers, right? Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes.
The belief that it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert. And she kind of makes the argument, which I thought was kind of brilliant, the way that she defined this. Well, if 10,000 hours makes you an expert in something, is that better or is that worse than spending 2,500 hours in 4 different areas? And in terms of becoming an expert, so Malcolm Gladwell would probably say the 10,000 hours is better because you're going to develop a higher level of proficiency in that one thing. That high level of proficiency is going to be the thing that's going to be valuable for you in the marketplace. That's kind of Cal Newport's thing with deep work. But Emilie says that view assumes that only skill is the only thing really that matters. And I think there's some truth to that, where if you develop a skill in something, but you don't like doing it, then you're just not going to do it. I kind of remember a point when I was growing up playing violin, because I was classically trained on the violin, and I was playing with symphonies when I was in high school. But I also reached a point where I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. This is boring. I made a little sign and put it in my violin case, like, for sale.
Nice.
And it took a while for me to get back into it once I went to college, because I was trained to read classical music, realized that wasn't really what I wanted to do with it. And as I had to start from scratch and developing different skills with the instrument, it became more fun. And now it's something that I continue to do as I play on the worship team at my church. So I can totally see how, if I hadn't sunk all of my 10,000 hours into violin, and I had split it up, 2,500 hours for violin, 2,500 hours into guitar, which is another thing that I've picked up, not in the not so distant past. But if you spread it out over these different skills, you can develop enough proficiency in these skills that creativity, ingenuity, and passion are the other things that she says are important, that those can kind of mash together from these different domains and create something that is more fulfilling for you as a person, which no one on the outside will be able to understand why you like doing this thing at a lower level than this other thing, which you maybe already have like a high proficiency in. They won't understand why you want to make that switch sometimes.
Yeah, I want to point out one thing here in that, and I say this because I'm guessing, based on me knowing you and you knowing me, that we're probably both in this category, but very different in the way that it fits. In that, and again, there are 4 different ways that people do this, but you can have an interest that is holding your attention for multiple years, and then you feel like you've reached a point and you're ready to move on from it and go on to a new interest. That can fall into this category as well. You could also be somebody who has 12 of these all at one time, and you want to keep all 12 of them in the air at one time. So that could also be someone in that. And you can fall in the middle too. And there's a few different like variations of those. But I just want to call that out because I think you and I are on opposite ends of that when we get into the actual technicals here. But
all right,
the main thing is that I think that it's interesting to consider that you need to have these different domains in different areas in order to keep yourself engaged in any of them. And as I was reading this beginning part, I was like, yes, 100%, this is me. Because how many times and how many of my followers have followed me on all of these different adventures that I go on? These are things that I have a tendency to do. And it's easy for me to see, like, I love doing woodworking. I love running sound. I have learned that I love putting on online events. I have learned that I love keyboards. I love fountain pens. I love pen and paper. I like membership sites. I like development work. Like, this is a huge mix of things. Yes, they have some similarities in things, but me doing woodworking has nothing to do with streaming at all. So that's a thing that I have learned. Like, I've just got a bunch of these interests. That's the type of thing that she's talking about.
Yeah.
When you have a lot of these different interests and you want to continue multiples of them, and she talks about how to figure out how many you need, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very fascinated to go through these specific approaches because I think we're different, Mike.
I think we probably are. One thing I want to call out here, though, is you mentioned woodworking, and I forget the other example. It was a technical example, that you just said, and how there's
who knows?
no.
I just off the top of my head, who knows?
I know you mentioned membership sites,
membership sites,
things.
Blogging, podcasting, audio,
So
community sites. Yeah,
it's maybe difficult to find a connection between woodworking and that stuff, but I believe after reading this book, it's kind of cemented even more firmly in my head that there is a connection there, and that's kind of what makes you you. And so Don't be ashamed that you have these things which don't seem to be connected in any way, because the fact that you have these experiences in these different domains, that's going to ultimately make you more creative. I think back to Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, which I probably reference way too much, but that's really the thing that...
And we've never done it here on the show.
Well, we'll have to at some point, because that book was kind of the thing that gave me the permission I needed to be creative. He talks about when you create something, you're just connecting dots in different ways. And so when you've got woodworking dots and you've got membership site dots and you've got podcasting dots, like, you are able to connect those dots. Sometimes you don't see the connections right away, but that's okay. Like, ultimately, that's just your palette that you have to work with. And that's the part that non-multipotentialites will never understand, because they'll say, okay, you want to be a woodworker because that's the only silo that they can see inside. That they don't have the ability to see the other silos or how they connect. And they say, well, you're pretty good at woodworking. If you would just devote yourself, you could really be an expert woodworker. And you're like, I don't want to be like that guy over there. I just
No.
want to do it a little bit, have some fun with it. And then I do think if you are able to make those connections, though, you're able to see how one domain influences another. That can create some motivation to keep going with some of these habits if you have multiples of these things that are going at the same time. Now, there is a spectrum that she talks about in this first section where you have a bunch of things going on at the same time on one end. And on the other end, you only do one thing, but you do it, you're all in for a little while, and then you completely drop it and you go do something else. It sounds like that's her approach. And she has an image of like her career path and how it's connected all these different things.
Right.
And the people in her life who don't understand the whole idea of like the multipotentialite lifestyle, they're like, well, you just are restarting all the time. And she doesn't view it that way. Like on an XY axis, like she's continuing to move up. She just goes up for a little bit and then switches lanes and goes up again. And
Right.
And I think that is a pretty powerful idea, even if you don't understand how those lanes connect.
Yeah, because, to go back to some of your examples here, I love sound equipment. Like this is not a secret, but I also really like doing video work as well. I like doing networking. I like doing web development work. So guess what? Whenever you do something like streaming, like right now, this always confuses people. Well, no, this is not as good an example. So we did a big worship in the parking lot event, thanks to COVID. Worship in the parking lot. In order to do that and live stream it at the same time, I had to have a full video crew, had to have a sound crew, had to have a technical producer of sorts, which ended up being me and another person. We had to have a video board. I had to have a stage. I had to have all the sound equipment. I had to have, somebody helping people determine when to go up on stage, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sitting with a headset on monitoring all of that, all the way down to, is the compressor correct on the pastor's voice? Like, that's the level of detail that I'm monitoring all at one time. And I know a lot of those areas pretty well. But between my ADD and this multipotentialite way of having interest, like all of those converged into a single event. And people were telling me afterwards, like I'd be stressed out. It's like, I was ready to go for another couple hours. Like I was fine. Like it's totally cool. But that's because I've done some work in a lot of those different arenas and they just happen to come together. But you're correct, like in things like woodworking, I don't want woodworking to be something I do professionally. I'll make cabinets. I made a nice China cabinet hutch out of cherry wood for my mother-in-law. But the skills I've learned in how to prepare and put pieces together in woodworking develops your puzzle brain and how to put individual components together. I use that in development work all the time.
Yeah.
It's the same skill, just in very different
Manifested
industries.
very differently, yeah. As you're describing what you were doing for the audio and the video, I think there maybe is no more multi-potentialite job than like an AV guy.
It's so true. So true.
Because you got to understand,
nuts.
I know a little bit about this stuff, but I know just enough to make what I record sound a little bit better.
Sure.
So you got to understand compression. You got to understand EQ. I mean, just even in the audio stuff, there's all these different things that you can go really deep on.
Yes.
And then it all comes together in a live event.
I'm listening to my voice and I'm hearing all the things that are wrong. I was like, well, I know what needs done, but I can't fix it with like the system I have. I can't fix that. So I just have to let it go. It's, forever a practice and patience and just letting it go.
Yeah. And that's actually very much like the group hug approach, which is the first one here. Before we get to that, though, just real briefly, I want to call out she has multipotentialite superpowers. I think these are great. We talked a little bit about this, how having these different domains to draw from can make you more creative. But I think these things, we need to document these. So number 1, idea synthesis. Number 2, rapid learning. Number 3, adaptability. Number 4, big picture thinking. And number 5, relating and translating. I think the one that jumps out to me the most about this is idea synthesis. And that is because I feel like that's what we have done with the books that we read for Bookworm. We read, for the most part, productivity, self-development, personal growth type books. But every once in a while, we'll get something that's very specific or very niche and just like totally in a different domain. And it's always fascinating to me how those things connect to like the getting things done type books.
Yes.
The systems books that are so prevalent in this space. And I don't know. It's kind of cool to see if you had a visual representation of this stuff, which is one of the things that I think is kind of cool about Roman Obsidian, is that it does give you the ability to see how those there we go. See how those dots connect. And the first time that you see that, it's kind of like, wow, I had no idea that stuff was there. It's like a manifestation of the stuff that's inside your brain on the screen in front of you. And being able to like click around and move between those things and see like, oh, that's how that's connected, because mentioned it in that book, and then that led to this thing, and that connected to the other thing, and it all comes back to growth mindset and flow.
Yes.
Like we kind of stumble on that stuff as we talk about these books sometimes, but being able to actually see it, I feel, is another evidence and support for the multipotentialite lifestyle.
I feel like we should just skip right over some of that, because I disagree with some of it. Because like the concept of like having an idea system that lets me see all of those connections from an ADD stance, that's a nightmare. Like,
okay.
No, you do not want that at all. Maybe
so
that's
you
some of
just
my
want to
complaint
see
with
the
Rome.
results. You don't want to know how the sausage is made.
Because if I go down that road, the sausage won't get made at all.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, that's fine. But I did have that. I did have that kind of aha moment the first time I saw that graph. And really, the thing that clicked for me is when I was looking at a specific book, and I saw the things that were connected to that book. Not like the giant one, like when you dump everything in there and you see all of the overwhelming number of dots.
Right.
But when you've got a handful of things that connect to something that you're actually studying and interested in right now, I think that's kind of cool. And there's probably other ways to do that. Maybe you can figure out a way to do that with the bullet journal. I don't know.
I don't. Like, this is, people try to externalize these connections a lot. And I find that, and there are a lot of folks, and I get what the point is, but when people talk about creating is more important than consuming, and I don't think I would disagree with the sentiment there, but I know that I need to continue consuming at a pretty high level in order to create.
Got it. Yep.
That's me. The things that I personally create from like a connection and a dot generation idea synthesis concept, they don't help me make big, broad jumps. It ends up being a waste of my time, because my brain moves so fast that I'm better off reading a book that I disagree with in some cases, like what was the recent one? Crossroads. So like that one gave me all kinds of ideas for other things. I didn't like the book, but it gave me tons and tons of connections to other things.
Sure.
But I don't need to externalize that. I'm better off taking advantage of what I learned right now and then build off of that and consuming some other things. That's how I operate. This is maybe why I have such an angst against some of these note takers, and that you love them, because we have very different views on how we come up with those ideas.
Yeah.
And how we go about synthesizing those. We're just on completely opposite ends of the spectrum on how we do that.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, I think. And you also mentioned the crossroads of should and must. And after reading this book, I feel like depending on your view of multipotentialitism, you could get very different reactions to that book.
Yes. And maybe that's where this comes from, because
right.
Maybe we should get into these different types.
Yeah, let's jump into the types.
I think your type would resonate with should and must more so than my type.
Okay.
That might be it.
Yeah, let's get into the types here, and let's go through all of them. And if you want to talk about like where you fit in here as we go, that's cool, and I'll try to do the same, although I'm not 100% sure which one I fit into. I have a feeling there's one that's dominant, but so we'll just jump into the first one here. The
I
group.
think I could tell you. You may tell you.
Yeah, let me hear what you think I am.
Okay. I'll do it after we go through this because I think it's going to be helpful for people to see what they are.
So
do you want me to go through them? You doing it?
I can do it.
Okay.
The four types are the group hug approach, which is having one multifaceted job or business that allows you to wear many hats. There's the slash approach, which is having 2 or more part-time jobs or businesses that you flip between on a regular basis. There's the Einstein approach, which is having one full-time job or business that fully supports you while leaving you with enough time and energy to pursue your other passions on the side. And the Phoenix approach, which is working in a single industry for several months or years and then shifting gears and starting a new career in a new industry. And there's helpful visuals for all of these in the book. I thought they were helpful anyways. And I feel like from the story at the beginning, you can tell that Emilie Wapnick is the Phoenix approach. But there's some cool ideas associated with each one of these. So let's break them down one by one, starting with the group hug approach. So the visual for this is literally like a big circle with money, meaning, and variety in the middle, and then kind of a one multifaceted job or business along the outside and like arrows going around it. So this is kind of like where you are able to just stay here for the rest of your life and you're totally happy because you're able to do all of these things which maybe aren't even in your job description, but they give you the ability to develop stuff that you're interested in, that you're passionate about, and allow you to feel like you're growing and you feel fulfilled without having to change your job. Is that a fair description?
Yes. And you're doing good.
All right. Do you have anything you want to share about the group hug approach?
I feel like the group hug approach is one that is difficult to locate.
Agreed.
Like if you're someone who needs a lot of things happening at once, like the parking lot thing I'm talking about from AV stance, I would say that most, I'm not going to say all, but most sound engineers that I've worked with fit into this particular category because you have to keep in mind not just the science of how you're getting sound out into the room, but you have to keep in mind the creative side of how are you actually putting together the feel of the room, because you can I can control, this is going to sound weird. Based on the way I run a soundboard, I can control how much a group is singing along with who's on stage.
Yeah, totally. I get it.
Based on the way you run it. So, yes, I have to have people on stage producing that sound, but the way I alter it, I can adjust that. So, that's a group hug approach. When you've got a bunch of these different aspects that you're maintaining all at one time. But I don't think these are easy to find.
No.
She mentioned, I think the architecture tends to fit into this to some, because you've got the science, the math side of it, but there's also an art form and a design aspect to it as well. So that's kind of what they're getting at, or she's getting at with that particular approach.
Yeah, and the thing that makes this work is something she calls smooshing, which is blending together disparate entities.
Right.
And she talks about how the group hug approach can either be found or created by smooshing, but finding that needle in the haystack, I think she would agree that's pretty rare. Some strategies she shares for smooshing, I can't say that word without laughing. Smooshing is working in a naturally interdisciplinary field, which is what you were describing with the architects. Figuring out where the multipotentialites in a particular area hang out, working for an open-minded organization where this isn't your job, but they need a new website, and you say, hey, I know web development, let me take a crack at it. And they're like, oh yeah, sure, why not? It'd be better than hiring somebody. Those places do exist, but most places will go hire the expert.
Right.
I would go hire the expert, honestly.
I don't. I do things on my own.
Well, on your own, it's okay, because if you break it, you can fix it.
So true.
But
so true.
I'm not going to go in and tinker with Joe's WordPress site. That makes me nervous.
I totally would, though. I would.
All right. Number 4 in the strategies for smooshing, making an existing job more plural. And number 5, starting a business. I feel like starting a business is one of the ones that could apply to all of these different approaches. And maybe is the thing that people would look at as, well, this is obvious that you should try to create your own thing that fits your specific, the way you're wired. But I don't think that's necessarily the best approach for everybody. So I want to make that point right here, because I feel like as you go through this book, you could get excited about, yeah, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and then just totally fail at it.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah. So that's the group hug approach.
One thing I want to call out here is that, like, to make this work, because one of the things she talks about earlier, and I don't remember the exact way of coming out at this, but you have to figure out how many different interests you need to maintain and roughly what those are.
Yes. So there's like a whole trying out section at the end where she walks you through step by step, like, see if this is for you. The first step in pretty much everything is creating your master list of interests.
Yes. And the reason I want to say that is because, like, this example I've been using of AV, there's like 2 to 3, maybe 3, possibly 4 different areas that you need to maintain it at one time. And if that's the number of things that you need, you know, if architecture is your thing, math, science, and design, like if 3 things is your interest requirement in that, this could work really well. If you're similar to me, like, because I did some of those exercises, for me it's close to 6 or 7. That's the problem. So something like a group hug approach won't work generally, because it's very, very difficult to find a single thing to do that's going to have that many in one spot.
Yep. I did not go through all of these because I kind of didn't see the point in doing it.
There's a ton. It's like worksheets at the end of these chapters or these sections, and it's like I skimmed a lot of it, to be honest.
Yeah. I like the fact that she includes them, and if you find somebody in the right stage of their life, I feel like going through those is going to be very valuable. It's going to open your eyes to some things.
Right.
But when I was looking at them and I was looking at the questions, I was like, okay, so if I identify as this other thing, like, what does that mean? Like, how does that change things? I am very happy where I'm at, doing what I'm doing. Like, I don't want to rock the boat yet. But if you are looking to rock the boat, or your boat's been rocked for you, that's kind of the perfect time to go through that sort of stuff.
Right. Right.
All right. One other thing I should mention here before we get into the next one is that she talks about in the summary of the 4 models that it is okay to mix and match between these. Not quite sure what that looks like, but I think that might be me. So the next approach is the slash approach. And this is the one where you have many different part-time jobs or businesses that you go back and forth between. And kind of the formula is part-time job or business plus part-time job or business plus part-time job or business plus or minus a part-time job or business equals the slash approach. This is the one that I heard about when I was talking to Jay. So I think he probably identifies himself as a slash. But
slasher.
Yeah, I don't want to say that, but yeah, I guess.
Don't read into that one. Listen into that one.
Yeah. She does use that term though, so it's completely fair.
It's true.
I cringed when I read it, but
did you read the footnote?
Yeah, I did.
She's like, this doesn't actually apply. Like, there's so many things wrong with this, but I'm going to use it anyway.
Yep. The footnotes are pretty funny in this book, by the way. They're not just the standard, here's the study I'm citing.
Right. It's like, get over it. Like, this is exactly what I'm going to say. I don't care what you think. This is what I need to say.
Exactly. So that was kind of cool. But the big idea from this slash approach is that each slash fulfills a different aspect of the totality of you. And I think that's kind of cool. That's a cool idea. And I think she mentions there's 3 paths that lead to a slash career. So I think we need to cover this before I say what I really want to say. And that is, you want out of your full-time job, you are being presented with a part-time opportunity, or you just dive in and you refine as you go. So the thing that jumps out to me here is like wanting out of your full-time job. I feel like I've talked to a lot of people who would describe their situation that way, and I would argue that that's maybe not the best approach to take. Is like, well, I just don't feel like this is the thing for me, and I want out of this situation. Well, what are you going to do instead? You know, I know a lot of people who will jump between jobs thinking that the grass is going to be greener over there, and then they get there and it's like, actually, I had it pretty good back where I was.
Yes.
So I don't think that you need, and this kind of gets into the next one, so I don't want to talk about too much yet, but just the fact that you're feeling a little bit unfulfilled in certain areas of your life doesn't necessarily mean that you have to abandon ship. And the slash approach would really, to summarize it, is like, what little thing can I do on the side which is going to allow me to fulfill that passion or that desire, that longing,
right?
That aspect of who I am.
Yeah, and I will say, like, the slash approach is one that I tried whenever I was doing development work as a freelancer, because I would do like web hosting, I would do actual development work, I did consulting, we did Bookworm was still going at that time too. So like I had 4 to 5 of these different income streams, and then there was Bookworm at the time. So like there's these different approaches that I've had like operating at the same time. So it's a place I've been, and I can tell you, like, that's not where I need to be.
Sure. Any other advice for people who find themselves in the slash approach? Because I feel like I'm not even qualified enough to speak to this. I feel like I've kind of accidentally tried this for a while, and it just stressed me out. Every time I get involved with a slash that I view as like a part-time thing, my brain always goes to, how can I make this the full-time thing?
Correct. Yeah.
And I get frustrated when it doesn't grow.
Yeah, that's the hard part, because, you know, if you're going to go down that path, number one, I would recommend that you start with one of these other approaches first and let those grow to a point where the collective of them will work.
Yeah.
But it's a math game financially, frankly, which she does call out, that, you know, you have to figure out what your bare minimum dollars are and how you're going to get that and how are you going to maintain that, and that's important. So she doesn't discount that. But what you have to do here is, I think you have to take at least the next approach we're going to talk about, the Einstein approach, and then let side things grow. So I guess let me just jump into that one quick. So the Einstein approach is, and it gets its name because of the way Einstein did his work. She's not 100% certain if Einstein was a multipotentialite or not, but he did have a full-time job in a patent office and then worked on his things after hours. That's the Einstein approach, where you have one thing that is good enough, to use her words. It's good enough to get the bills paid, and then you have these other things that you do to fulfill yourself and to basically give yourself the space to explore those interests. And they don't have to drive an income. You're not requiring that, but it does help if it does. But it gives you different avenues to explore. If you want to do the slash approach, if the concept of having one core thing that you're doing, that your work comes from, or that your income comes from, then you can start with that. I would recommend you start with that Einstein approach and then start things on the side, and then continue to let those grow until the collective of those becomes large enough to let you forego the main. But be very leery of what you're saying, Mike, in that if you do that, the temptation is to take one and go big with it. This is what I did. So I had a slash approach that was working, and I had web development, I had all these other different avenues, and it was working. But everyone always told me that you got to find your thing and go for it. Like, that's the thing that people tell you. So I slowly kicked off about 3 of my side deals that were driving an income, so where I could focus on the one that was the most lucrative, and I burnt out on it, and it didn't stick. So then Joe's been on a spiral ever since. I couldn't have termed it this way until reading this book, but that's essentially what I did. So if you're interested in the slash approach, my encouragement to you is do the Einstein approach first, where you do have the one that is good enough and then it fulfills one of those interests, and then put the things on the side and let those slashes slowly grow. That's what I got.
I think there's two ways you can work the slash approach. You can just be fine with all of the things that you're doing, never really reaching their full potential, which is not appealing to me at all.
Sure.
Or you can pick one of your slashes and say this one is more important than the others.
Right.
Which essentially is the Einstein approach. But I think there's maybe some middle ground there. Because the Einstein approach really is talking about like the good enough job. And this is the thing that makes me bristle with the Einstein approach. If this term was not there, I would be 100% on board the Einstein train.
Sure.
But I don't envision what I do at the suite setup as the good enough job. Like I really do enjoy being there and what I get to do. And I feel like that helps me to grow and develop skills that ultimately that's the thing for me is everything that I'm doing. I want it to help me to grow as a person. So you could look at it and say, well, you're doing an Einstein approach and you've got the suite setup, you've got focus, you've got bookworm, all these little things on the side. And I think that if you just look at the chart in the book, that's accurate until you label the thing in the middle the good enough job. And then I'm like, no, I don't like this anymore.
No, that's because you're not an Einstein multipotentialite.
Okay, what do you think I am?
We got one more.
The Phoenix? All right.
We got to talk about the Phoenix before we get there.
We can talk about the Phoenix, yeah. Before we get there, real quickly, what makes a good enough job? Because I do think that this applies to some people, and there's nothing wrong with taking the Einstein approach where you are working in the patent office and your brilliance is wasted there, but you have enough in the tank for the other stuff when you get done. So what makes a good enough job good enough? It has to be enjoyable, preferably even challenging and fun, and in an area in which you have genuine interest. You have to have a high enough salary to allow you to meet your financial goals, and it has to leave you with enough free time and energy to pursue your other interests outside of work. And again, I don't like the term good enough job, but that all makes sense to me. One of the things I've discovered is that I can work really hard on something for a while in one domain and then go do something else in a different domain, and it's almost like my energy levels have been reset. It sounds kind of weird, but it's almost like you have different tanks for the different abilities or different modes that you operate in. I can be creating something, writing, creating a course, whatever, just feel totally drained. Stop, pick up my guitar, start plunking around on the guitar. Again, I'm still creating, but it's a different part of the brain that it's activating. It's like, so just 10 minutes plunking around on the guitar, and now I'm re-energized and I'm ready to get back to work. I have no idea how that works. I just know that it does work.
Yeah. Two things I want to point out here. One, the chat had a good question of, the difference between a multipotentialite and a polymath. And I think that's an important distinction because she does call that out in that she's not referring to a polymath. So a polymath being someone who is like an expert in a whole bunch of different arenas. And I think that's that's one spectrum, but I think that's like beyond a multipotentialite, like multipotentialite to the extreme.
It's a version of a multipotentialite, but multipotentialite doesn't mean that. Like she has alternate names at the beginning, and polymath is one of the ones she lists there, along with Renaissance person, jack of all trades, generalist, scanner, putty-like. But polymath is, in my opinion, you've achieved like that 10,000 hour level of expertise in these different areas.
Times 12.
Yeah. So like that is something that is like the top 1%, but that's not something like if you could call it that, but I think trying to become that is not a great idea.
No. The other thing I want to bring up is that she does call out that you can like mix and match these, and it does tend to overlap in different ways. And you can be all like a bunch of these in different times, and you can grow from one to the other. This is why I don't think you're actually one of these, Mike. I think, and the reason I think you're having a hard time nailing it down is because I'm not one of these as well.
Okay.
So I need close to 6 or 7 different things going on at one time to feel like I have all of my interests and my energy appropriately spread out. This is why it's so difficult for me to work out how to make this work. Right now, what I have is a mix of the group hug approach and the Einstein approach and the slash approach. So I have a mix of those three currently. So my main core day job has the AV world plus networking plus web development all thrown into one. So it covers a lot of different areas. But I also have things nights, weekends, and left overtime when we do things like Bookworm, or I've got Analog Joe, or I've got my own code projects that I work on, which kind of become slash approaches because of the way I'm doing the Einstein approach.
Sure.
Does that make sense? So like you've got these different ways that you're coming at it. I think that for you, the sweet setup is a really nice, and the reason you don't like the good enough phrase is because you don't have an Einstein approach. You have a group hug approach with Einstein thrown on top.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's why. So like the group hug, she never talks about a good enough. She talks about how it fulfills you in a lot of different ways because there's so many different things that you're doing.
Yeah.
Because you never know. Like you could be recording, you could be writing scripts, you could be, writing blog posts, like they're recording screencasts. Like there's so many different things that you can do at the sweet setup that it is a multi-potentialite type of role, a group hug type role. Having built and made a lot of that type of content, it takes a lot of different skills to do that. So I would imagine that currently you have that group hug approach in your editor position at the Sweet Setup, but you do have Bookworm. You've got your interest in fountain pens. You've got your interest in mechanical keyboards. To me, those fit in with your Einstein after hours thing.
Sure.
But that the aspect of good enough from Einstein doesn't apply.
Got it.
That's my perspective. How accurate am I?
I think that makes sense. The one aspect though is from the slash approach, I think, is that anytime you monetize something, essentially it is a part-time job.
Sure. Yeah.
So I could very well be doing podcasts, as an example, for no money, just for the experience that I get out of them. And at that point, it's kind of like a little blip in the Einstein approach. But the moment that they do contribute to your income, I think they kind of transition into slash territory.
Sure.
So it's really hard for me to define these, but basically I view it as like there's all these different dots. The group hug approach is like the one giant dot.
Yep.
The good enough job is like a pretty big dot, not quite as big. And then you've got the part-time dots, which are a little bit smaller. And then you've got like the tiny little ones, which are just like, that's something I'm interested in, but I'm not going to turn that into a jobby.
Sure.
That's just going to stay a hobby.
It makes sense. And then like you throw on top of this, because I think you do this as well as I do, like in special interest things off on the side. Like I picked up motion graphic design a little bit so that I could do some animations and stuff on screen because I wanted to be able to do that. So I figured out how to do it. That type of thing fits into the Phoenix approach. So like,
sure,
I'll have these things where it's like, okay, I'm going to go learn how to do this. I'm going to learn how to do it well enough. And then once I've figured it out and it becomes easy, I don't want it anymore. Like I need to move on. Like that's the thing. People are always like, oh, I got to get through the learning curve so that it gets easy. It's like, sure, that's great. But as soon as it gets easy, I'm gone. Like that's when I need to move on and do other things because I know that for me, the challenge in that beginner's curve is what keeps me interested. And that's what keeps me coming into the new thing. So I have the Phoenix approach in that sense.
Yeah, you do.
I'm going to go learn that. And once I have it mastered, I'm done. I need to go on to something else.
Yeah, so the Phoenix approach, you probably don't need to spend a lot of time talking about because I think it's pretty straightforward. Basically, you do something, you build a career, you get bored like Joe, you kill it, and then you rise from the ashes to do something else. She does have the loathing scale, which she talks about in this section of how to tell when you should cut things loose. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is I love my job, 10, I feel sick thinking about going to work. She mentions that the best time to switch is somewhere between 5 and 8. If you wait until 9 or 10, you probably won't make a very graceful exit. And then she's got some tips for a smooth transition, which I could see where these are maybe helpful, but this whole approach just is not for me. This scares the heck out of me. I don't want to do this.
Yes.
So I'll let you, the part-time Phoenix, explain
Well,
what to do in these situations.
I have been back and forth with jobs and stuff because I don't feel like I understood this. And I have been following what people tell me in that you need to find your one thing. And I don't think that's true. I think that the problem I have is the need for so many different interests. And if I want to say that that's a thing that I actually need, and then it's not just me being dumb and I need to man up and pick one. Like I don't want to do that. So if I don't want to do that, I have to figure out how to make something else work. I think that as you go through the learning process with this, it's very easy for someone who is single and able to take on a lot of risk to do something like the slash approach. It's also easy for someone in that same situation to do something like the Phoenix approach. So one being you've got a handful of different things, contracts, part-times, whatever, to make up your income. The Phoenix being, I'm going to do this for 3 years, and then I'm going to go do something else for 3 years, and then I'm going to go do something else for 2. Like, you can do that when you don't need stability and a lack of risk. If you have kids and a family to provide for, that level of risk is a little less tolerable. So, although I would have a tendency to want to go after that slash approach, I feel like that's something my tendency would be. Instead of doing that, I'm pursuing a combination of others in order to maintain that at a better level, in order to have that stability. So could I go down the Phoenix route? I probably could, but I don't like the risk involved with trying to exit gracefully, probably before I really need to, and trying to get into something else. The concept of leaving and starting things, I don't care for. Am I good at the beginner's curve? Yeah, I'm really good at that. I can pick up new things very quickly, and a lot of people can in this mindset, like when you have this multipotentialite concept in your brain. So if you have that, I feel like it's easy to make those moves, like to learn new things. But I don't care for the Phoenix approach, though people do. Obviously, Emilie is one that does that. She has a tendency to do it in that way. But I have a hard time recommending that one.
Yeah, I feel like a discussion of risk aversion is missing from this whole book.
Yeah, that's fair.
It just assumes that there's this internal trigger that is just going to go off every so often, and you just gotta go with it. But it's not actually true. I also think that these different approaches are maybe more powerful, maybe not more powerful. I understand why she breaks it into these 4 different buckets. This is a very straightforward model that people can wrap their head around. But I feel like I could connect with this more if she had said, these are the components, like I mentioned, the different size dots. Now place them on your canvas how you see fit. I feel like if you take that approach, you end up with something feeling a lot more custom, and also a lot more like, I'm not this oddball who's managed to make this weird thing work.
Right.
I understand how the pieces fit together. I'm still kind of, even after going through this, kind of questioning like how this works for me. Like I said, the 2 that I thought applied to me were the Einstein approach and the slash approach. I do think you're right that the group hug approach, there's an aspect of that too into what I do. So now we're in this spot again, just like I was with the 4 tendencies, where like I'm part this, part that, part the other thing.
Yeah.
The difference here being that Emilie has given me permission to combine them.
Correct. Yeah. And that's so true. And I think that's why, like in this case, I can see a little bit of all of these in me. You know, I don't normally do that when we have these particular scenarios. I think that if I have to focus on one, the Einstein approach is probably the core of what I have a tendency to lean towards currently. But whenever she's referring to the different aspects that go into a multipotentialite like brain method, if you will. Like you've got the ability to adapt to things quickly. You can translate things. You can see into the future easily. Like these are all things I'm really good at and have capitalized on in a lot of different arenas, and am actively using that in a lot of different conversations I'm having right now. So like these are things that I'm taking advantage of regularly. And I think that, having that collection of things put together and being able to articulate those makes it easier for me to comprehend what it is that my brain is trying to do, because I have so many interests, and if I see something new and shiny, like I want to jump in and go use it, but having ways to explain why I'm doing that, I feel like is valuable. Does she need to put together these approaches and these work models in order to explain them to you and the different ways that it can come out? Yeah, probably. I don't know how else you would do that. I mean, she could explain each individual components and tell you, well, yeah, you can mix and match all these individual pieces. But I feel like that's much harder to resonate with.
Yeah.
Like putting names to these and putting predefined collections together for you makes it easier for you to understand how these things can work together, which is why I think she backs off a little bit from that at the end of this and says, yeah, you can mix and match this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why, because she's trying to show you that you can pull these things apart.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I do wish she had taken a little bit of extra time to give some examples of how you could combine these different approaches rather than try to give us all productivity advice in chapter 8.
Yes. Yeah, I was doing good till part 3 came around.
Yeah. So part 3 is common multipotentialite stumbling blocks, and chapter 8 is your personal productivity system. And you and I are probably oddballs in that we've been in this space and studied this stuff for a long time. So we have a totally different approach to this than the average person probably who's just discovered multipotentialitism and is all on board with how do I make this work. So I get that being a multipotentialite, maybe there's an inherent need for this, and maybe it's the missing component for a lot of people. But I also think that she does not do a real great job of explaining what you need to know. So first of all, it's kind of presented as this is everything you need to know. She doesn't say that, but that's kind of like, I'm going to hit all the different things. She doesn't hit all the things.
Right.
She mentions at the beginning that productivity is taking action that moves us towards our goals. As I was reading this whole book, I was like, goals are worthless. So I was kind of shocked when she's like, yeah, you need to set goals basically, and then productivity is the thing that helps you get to them. I think the multipotentialite lifestyle is the biggest argument for just developing the habits. I'm interested in this thing, so I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to do it every day for either a little bit or a lot, and I'm going to see where it goes, and I'm not going to worry about the outcome. Goals are totally against that. Goals are, I'm going to develop this skill, this level of proficiency, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to achieve it. I'm going to put in the 10,000 hours. But she's basically the rest of the book saying, no, feel free to pull the plug anytime you want.
Right.
So those two things are not compatible, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wanted her to quit when she started in on this. It seems like books like this, people just love to offer productivity advice. And it makes me wonder if it's because they're like us coming from the productivity world and like, oh, I discovered this whole thing and I want to talk about it, but I really love talking about productivity. So I need to put like a whole section about it so that I can share my views on that in there because it's something I love. So I don't know if that's true. Totally made that up just now.
Yeah.
But that's my perspective on it. It's a little tiring to do that. I mean, there are productivity system books. Like generally, even with Analog Joe, I've learned that there are a lot of people that just have their systems and they really don't want your advice on it.
Yeah.
And when you pick up a book like this, the intent is to learn how to manage multiple interests from a mindset stance, not a practical day-to-day stance.
Yep.
So I feel like it's stepping into the wrong sector whenever she does that. But
everything about the multipotentialite lifestyle is totally custom. in my opinion.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so if I were to pick a complementary productivity book for this, like this is the one you should read if you are a multipotentialite and you're trying to figure out which aspects of productivity to apply, I would recommend Make Time by Jake Knapp and John Zaratsky. I know you downgraded it when we did episode 100, and I get that, but I do think like the way they do it, where they break it into like the 86 different components, you'll find some in there that you're like, yeah, totally, this fits my mishmash of a career, and I can totally do this. And others you'll be like, no, I'm not going to, that's not going to work for me.
Right.
Whereas if you take any of the other systems-based books, you're going to run into some point in that system where, no, that's not going to work for me.
Right.
And so having, the elements that you can combine and the way they present it, very visual, I feel like that's a great place to start. If you do need some help with this, if I were to summarize everything here, it's focus on the thing you want to focus on when you want to focus on it.
Yes.
Which, I mean, she gets into, again, very brief section, but she talks about flow. She talks about the 3 C's by Leo Babauta: creating, connecting, consuming. You can tell she studied this stuff, but to try to condense it into kind of a system for multipotentialites, which is how it comes across, even if that's not what she says. She talks about the Pomodoro method, getting yourself into a positive emotional state, how to choose what you're working on when with priority projects, setting limits on your tinkering time. I mean, a lot of this stuff is like nuggets of truth in there, but no matter how you would try to explain this, it's never going to fit for everybody. And really, like the thing you want to get good on, your superpower, if you're a multipotentialite, is developing your ability to focus. And when you are doing something, you're doing it and you're not distracted by all the other stuff. And then when you're done with that thing, you go to the next thing, even if it's a totally different thing, totally different domain.
Yes, I agree with you. But I don't know that, again, you and I are oddballs. So I don't know how much of our angst against the productivity tips and tricks are valid. Part of me wonders, who's the publisher? Harper One. Part of me wonders if like the publishers and the editors push for this.
Yeah.
Because I wonder if like the productivity tips and tricks thing sells books.
It probably does.
Is that true?
I don't know. I mean,
you and I are, again, we're oddballs. We review these things. It's our job to read these and try to distill them and compare them to over 100 other books now and show how it's different than those or how it can help you having read all of those others. Like that's a lot of what we're doing, but not everyone comes from that perspective.
yeah.
So I wonder.
I also think there's an element of I'm writing a book. Oh my gosh, I need to get everything out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you read, like I'm big into the leadership space. I like studying that stuff. And so John Maxwell is kind of the name when it comes to leadership books. He's got dozens of them. And you read a John Maxwell book and he's sharing on a specific aspect of leadership and he doesn't feel the need to bring up all the other stuff in like the ancillary sort of connected domains because he knows there's other books. Either they exist or he's going to write them that are going to speak to those things.
Right.
So I get it where, and I'm not saying this is exactly what happened, but maybe Emilie's writing this book about her story because she's a multipotentialite. She's figuring this stuff. So she's sharing what she's learned. And then she's like, a big part of what allows me to do this is the stuff I've learned about productivity. People got to know this. And so she tries to cram it in here.
Right.
But in my opinion, the book would be better without that stuff in it. If you really want to talk about that, then write a productivity book. And maybe she can't get a book deal for that book, which is why she included it in this one.
Sure.
Totally speculating at this point. I think she's actually a really good author, really entertaining. We'll talk about that when we get to style and rating.
Yeah.
But tacking it on here just feels a little bit disjointed.
Yeah. And, chat has a good point too. It could just be filler material, like productivity stuff in general. It could be a good way to extend the length of the book in order to make it easier for the editors and publishers to say yes and kick it out into the world. I don't know. I I don't know what to think about that part. We see it a lot. It seems like there's a lot of them that have that.
On the topic of filler material, the next chapter, which she combined, fear, confidence, and dealing with people who don't understand. There's 3 more chapters for your book. Go deep on those things.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Because these are really well written. The ailments of the internal critics, and she talks about the guilt and the shame, the discomfort of being a beginner again and again, the fear of not being the best, imposter syndrome. Again, this part, I feel like she's got a lot to say. And as she's describing these different things, I'm like, yeah, I've been there. So I've kind of gone from loving the book to hating the book to loving it again.
Right. Because it would be very easy for her to say, okay, let me deep dive 2 or 3 of these.
Exactly.
But then throw one more right after those 4 approaches that shows how people mix and match them. And there's your book. It actually might be longer than this because this actually isn't super long.
Yeah, it's only 200 pages. I'm not sure how many words are in it, but most of the books we read tend to be like 250 plus, right, around there. And there's also a lot of visuals in this one. So I feel like this could have been a longer book and incorporated those different aspects of it. I wish she would have gone deeper into the internal and external critics. And then the last part of this, chapter 9 too, is all about dealing with the question, which she alluded to at the beginning. This is kind of part of her story. Someone asked her, what do you do? And she's like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So I love that she includes a chapter at the end here about what do you do when someone asks you, what is it that you do?
I do 7 different things. That's what I do.
Yeah, this maybe is worth unpacking a little bit because there's 2 different approaches. One is a one-liner that's easily understandable. I've talked to David Sparks about this, and he doesn't try to explain to people that he's a podcaster and he makes screencasts. He's like, I work in computers.
Yes.
And again, like it depends on the room, who's asking, but that one eliminates a lot of the, well, what is a podcast sort of a thing.
Yes.
So I get that.
Yep.
The other one is the less conventional but more accurate answer that will likely lead to a conversation. And so again, read the room, figure out, is this someone you want to spend the next 10 minutes talking to explain what it is that you actually do? If so, use that approach. If not, then just give them the canned answer, which I don't know why, but every time someone asks me that and I'm looking for that canned answer, I feel like I can't find it.
Sure.
I feel like it catches me off guard every single time. I don't know why.
I think I have a few that I rotate just for fun. Like I don't have one like, oh, I'm a sound engineer. I work in IT. I'm a web developer. Like I tend to just rotate them. I have a friend who is a police detective who tells people he's a garbage collector because he doesn't want to go through the whole, oh, what do you do with? He's like, I don't want to, like, if I don't want to talk to him, I just tell him I'm a garbage collector. Nobody wants to talk about that.
Yeah.
Especially over dinner.
Yeah. See, I feel like every time I go through something like this, I land on, well, I'm a writer.
Sure.
But then in the moment, I never think to use that. I don't know why. Like my brain just stops functioning. It's like, I do a lot of things.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I would say I was an online editor in your case.
Yeah. That's probably more accurate. Maybe that's the thing is I just haven't nailed down the one that really I feel good using. Another thing she mentions in here though, which I thought was really helpful, is to use an umbrella title. And there's a formula for this she uses. I help blank do blank. And I think that's pretty genius. That could save a lot of follow-up questions if you took the time to think through that.
But it only works in some scenarios.
True.
If you're doing woodworking and you're a sound engineer, you can't put those 2 together in that sentence.
Yeah.
You see my point?
I'm tempted to say, well, there's got to be a way to do it, but I don't know where I would start with that one. Yeah.
Throw web development on top of it, and I wish you all the best. And we're only on 3. If you got 6 or 7, good luck.
Yeah.
I make stuff.
Help make people happy by creating things.
Like, there you go. I make sound waves. I make wood stuff. I make websites. Like, I make stuff.
I'm a content creator.
Too fun.
All right, so that's chapter 9. And then the last part of this, the conclusion, which I jotted on here, it's only a couple pages long. But I wanted to mention this because this is where she encourages you to lead with your multipotentiality, don't minimize your differences, and feature the things that make you unique. And as I read through this, I just mentioned, the last section on what do you do, having trouble answering that question, to realize that I tend to shy away from those things. Even though I 100% understand that that's what makes me me and what brings value to the stuff that I do, I still have trouble being okay with that in public. And so there's probably a few people like me who need the kick in the pants or the encouragement to not be afraid of that stuff. And for people who are considering this, she asked the question, what would your life be like if you gave yourself permission to be everything that you wanted to be? Because I think that's another thing that if you're not a multipotentialite, that can be kind of scary. It's like, well, I have a desire to do this thing over here, but I just can't do it right now. And so you kick the can down the road, and maybe I'll get to that at some other point. You never do. And the multipotentialite lifestyle basically gives you permission to do those things now, which
Sure.
I think ends up making you happier and more fulfilled.
I would agree with that. This is kind of the transition I'm in. So, yes.
Can't do all the things, obviously. You do have to pick them. But I think if you take the multipotentialite approach and you are intentional about the things that you choose, so if you follow these action items and you pare them down as she's going through different approaches, you will eventually get to that point where you are happy with the things that you are doing.
Yeah, if you saw the tweets I put out to do the advertisements for when we were streaming today, you saw that it's like, hey, I finally figured out how to do everything. Well, it's kind of course, a misnomer in that, like, yes, you can do a lot of different things, but you have to be very specific in how you do them.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, be aware of what the potential downsides of that are. So that's the sort of thing we've talked about a lot on other books, is like the downsides of heading down one path versus another. So I am grateful she at least called it out.
I'm a little bit curious how this sits with me over time, because just that title, How to Be Everything, brings to mind the quote by David Allen that you can do anything, but you can't do everything.
Correct. Yes.
And there are limits to the number of things that you can do. So maybe it's just that this book should have been titled How to Be a Multipotentialite, and the term How to Be Everything is a little bit more catchy, which is why they used it, but really isn't accurate in describing what she's talking about. But it's also quite possible that she's telling people, yeah, just squeeze in one more thing, which that, again, I think is kind of bad advice. So,
but it's also how to be everything, not how to do everything.
Exactly. So there's a lot of nuance here, I think, which you can miss if you just look at the title.
Yeah. And, even like what I was putting out on Twitter, again, is a distortion of that. Like, I figured out how to do everything. No. I know how to get everything off my task list. No, that's not what we're talking about here. This is, like, again, to use these same examples, like, I love to be a sound engineer. I love to be a woodworker. I love to build websites. I love to be a web developer. I love to be someone who runs events online. Like, these are things I like to be. But that does not mean I get to do absolutely everything. That does not mean I'm the one building a video system where I can send you quick videos in your email. Like, I'm not building that. I'm going to use something else. So, like, that is very different in the scheme of this.
And that's the thing I'm struggling with. There's this concept, the curse of knowledge, where if you've been around something long enough, you know enough about something, you kind of forget what it's like to be a beginner. And so I think you and I both fall into that, where we know we can't do all the things. And that's a point everybody reaches on their own personal productivity journey, is picking the things that you're going to do, being intentional about them, cutting everything else that's really not important. But is that what most multipotentialites who are picking up this book for the first time, this is their entry into the productivity space, are they going to understand that? And are they going to understand that reading this book? I'm not so sure.
Sure.
That's not really Emilie's fault, but I think it's a trap. It's a pitfall that you have to watch out for.
Yeah, I think there is potential, to use the same word, with showing these different approaches to having multiple interests. I think if you're brand new to, like, take a step back. If you don't read books and this is the first book you've picked up in years, this is going to hit you very differently than it will you and I.
Exactly. Danger.
So, but is it? That's what I don't know. Because if this is the first book you've picked up because someone listened to a bookworm podcast and said, hey, this is something you should read if you have a ton of interests, and this would help you figure out how to make those work, and they handed you this book and you read it, then would that be helpful or not? I feel like depending on where you're at in understanding yourself, it's going to hit you very differently. Like if you're someone who is very self-aware, you're learning, do you work well when you do a remote work? Do you need to have side things in order to stay focused on your main job? Or do you feel like you leave jobs all the time and you're always in this mess of hiring and you can't figure out why you can't hold a job? Where are you in that journey? If you have gotten to where you understand some of yourself and why some of that happens, I feel like this could be helpful.
Yep, I agree.
But if you have no concept as to why they keep firing you after a year and a half, this is probably going to make it worse.
Yeah, she doesn't make the disclaimer, but I feel like it should be there, and you articulated it perfectly, that this will help you be anything that you want, but it will not help you do all the things and do everything that you want. There's a difference there that I'm not sure the average person picking this up will make that distinction. Maybe I'm just being oversensitive because I've been burned by that myself in the past, but I see that as a potential pitfall, and I'd be a little bit hesitant recommending this. I'd have to know the person I'm recommending this to, basically.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want them to fall into that.
The easy way is I will recommend this to every single person if you go listen to every single Bookworm episode first.
There you go.
There's your cop-out. You don't have to go read a whole bunch of books first. Just go listen to Bookworm.
That's right. All right, action items?
Sure, you have one. I don't.
I do. She mentions in this book the perfect day exercise, which is something that I've done in the past, and I think it's time I do it again. And I feel like this is going to be kind of interesting to go through this with a multipotentialite lens. So basic idea here being to map out my perfect day, and I'm going to take it even further, like my perfect week, and identify like these are the things that are in my perfect day and in my perfect week, and how do they relate to the different dots. And I was hoping by the end of this you would convince me I was one of these models and how that model is supported by the way I spend my time, but I don't think that part is going to make it into this action item. So
sorry.
That's okay. You do not have any action items, correct?
I don't, because like this is the one that you wrote down, this perfect day exercise is the one that I'm the most inclined to do. I have done this a handful of times because of Michael Hyatt. He has his ideal week thing that he promotes regularly, and I've done that a handful of times in the past. And what I have learned is that my ideal week is different every week.
Sure.
That's my problem. And I've done like ideal days before, perfect days. Like I get up and I do this and then I do that and then this and then that. And I have to have my days different day over day. So the trouble comes when, like, in order to do that well, I feel like I have to have a different day layout after breakfast. Before breakfast is always the same. But after breakfast, that has to be different in about 21 different ways. Like I have to have 21 days that are different before I'm ready to go back to the other. This is my problem. But I know this. Like I know this is
load Tuesday thing. Variation 3.5.
Correct. Yeah, 3.5.673. Like that's just the way this works. Rendition 42. This is my life. But I know this about myself. So yes, a lot of these exercises are interesting. Some of them I have gone through in order to figure out how many interests I have to have. So maybe you could put that as an action item, and I've already got it done. But these are yes, I don't have any other action items.
I think it's interesting that you started doing some of the action items that she gives you in the book, and I was not interested in doing those at all.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a little bit alarming to me from the approach that this book is trying to take. Like, I generally like this approach where you give people information and then you help them apply it. But I got a lot out of the information. Didn't want to go through any of the action items she suggested, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which now we're getting into style and rating. So let's do this. I really enjoy her writing style. I feel like it's very approachable. It's quite humorous. It's pretty relaxed and casual, but still she does it with an authoritative tone where you understand that she knows what she's talking about. The place that kind of fell down was the productivity section, not because she doesn't understand the stuff, but just because she's trying to condense so much into a small area, in my opinion. If she had expanded that material over the breadth of an entire book, I think she would have had enough words. Again, me totally projecting here, but I'm guessing based on her study that she has enough to say about those things that she could fill a book. And I feel like you kind of get ripped off when you try to pack it into this one. So that's not even a knock on her style, just the trying to do too much, I think, with the book itself. But the whole description of the multipotentialite lifestyle, her stories, describing like the anxiety that you go through when someone asks you, what do you do? I could totally relate to all of this stuff. I feel like she has real great visuals for the different models. I do wish she would have kind of talked about how you could combine them together and give some examples maybe. But in the models themselves, she uses great stories, people that she knows, people that she talked to who are doing different things. So you walk away with it at least understanding the 4 different approaches. I feel like the last part of the book is maybe the best part from my perspective on like the internal critic and dealing with people who don't understand what a multipotentialite is. That's chapter 9. Again, we talked about this, but I wish that section would have been bigger. I definitely want to hear what she has to say about that. Altogether, I'm glad that we read this book, and I actually got more out of it than I thought I was going to. Every time my wife saw me reading this book, she's like, oh, there's that millennial book again.
Yes. Yes.
But if you can get past that stigma, I feel like there's a lot of good stuff in here, especially for people like us who don't feel satisfied just doing one thing. I feel like she does a good job of helping you understand, for people like you and I, how we're wired and what little things that we can do to make it more effective and more meaningful. I do think you got to be careful who you recommend this to. I don't think it's for everybody. There are people who they're just absolutely not going to resonate with anything in this book. But for the right person, this is a really good book. I'm going to rate it at 4.0. And yeah, really the only negative thing I can say about it is that personal productivity section. That's the only part that I really didn't want to read.
Sure.
Everything else was very engaging. Read through it fairly quickly. The action items, I think, even though I didn't want to do any of them, were great, because if you find yourself in the right stage of life, that's totally the thing that can shine the light bulb on, oh yeah, that's what I should do right now. I feel like I've gone through those moments in my life where, getting let go from my previous job, that would have been a great point for me to read this book and go through those action items, but I didn't have it then. And now I'm kind of in a different situation where I'm happy with the different components that are here. So I'm not going to deconstruct things. But if you are unhappy with certain things, then yeah, I think it's worth the effort. And I think the action items themselves are good, like the ways to try out the different styles. So I'm not going to knock her for that.
Sure.
Don't think it's one of the most transformational, impactful books I've ever read, but was pleasantly surprised by it. So 4.0.
Yeah. I will concur that she is very good at putting stories and putting a book together. And at some point I start to wonder how much of that is editors and publishers than it is the authors. But, there is that side of it. But I think that the part about this that truly impacted me, we get to a point where we say if we get one thing out of a book, then it was worth reading. And in this particular case, I feel like putting terminology around having different interests and articulating that it's okay to operate that way has been quite a revelation to me. That's because I have had a lot of failures in attempting to set up one thing that I'm going to be focusing on. and it burns me whenever I do that. And although I need to find one thing as a core to use kind of the Einstein approach, I also know that it's important for me to maintain things in a diverse aspect outside of that. So just making that distinction and making that clear has been super helpful to me. So I'm very glad I've read it. I think it's a different story when it comes to me recommending it to other people. I think you said it very well in that, like, I'm going to be paying attention to who I recommend this to. I don't think this is just a blanket. We have a lot of books that we just blanket say, yes, you need to read this. And I don't think this is one of those. I think that you've rated it right on with the 4.0. I'll join you there in that I think that there's a lot in it that you can glean. I wanted her to stop when she got to all the productivity stuff. How many times do we say that? Like, it seems like if you put that section in your book, you will not get a 5-star book. Like, it seems like that is just the way it goes. That's the way we operate.
Yep.
So I think it has to be at 4.0. I think if you have a lot of productivity book background, this is potentially a good book for you. So I could see that being something of a helpful thing to do. But I'm not going to just blanket recommend it to people. I'm just not.
Right.
That's what I got.
Me too. All right. So what's next?
Next up is The Minimalist Home by Joshua Becker. This is the second of Josh's that we've read. The More of Less was the other one that we did. And I'm very interested in this. The tagline on it is a room-by-room guide to a decluttered, refocused life.
Yeah.
I received this in the mail, Mike, and I received it at the same time as I received How to Be Everything. And it was sitting on the table, and I think I took my backpack down to my office, and I came back, the book was gone. Wait, what? And I look over, my wife had it on the couch. She wasn't feeling super well, and she just asked me, is it okay if I just have this for the day? Sure, why not? So I'm going about, this is a Saturday, so I'm going about things around the house and such, and it got to be lunchtime, and I asked her how the book was going. She goes, it's okay. Like, it's all right. Like, there's some things I like about it. There's things I don't like about it. She was halfway through the book at that point. And then the girls do like a nap/rest time in the afternoon. And then by the time they were done with rest time at like 2:30 or so, I went to check on Becky to make sure she didn't need anything, and she was done with it. So like, okay. So my wife has read it and is very curious for me to read it because she wants to talk about it.
Right.
She thinks that Josh has some very terrible ideas and that there are some really cool ideas. So I don't know what those are. She hasn't told me anything about it. So I don't know. That'll be our next one. That's what we'll go through next time.
All right. Sounds good. Now, you mentioned Michael Hyatt earlier.
Yes.
I actually got to interview him for Focused.
Sure.
So in an upcoming episode, we talked to Michael Hyatt, David and I do, but one of the books that came out of that conversation, I mean, you want to be around someone who reads a lot, look at Michael Hyatt.
I know.
He's got a whole service called Leader Books where just giving you recommendations and study guides and implementation guides and stuff like that. But one of the books that he mentioned, because he was talking about how his company has shifted doing things during the pandemic. They used to have a co-working space in Nashville, and I had looked at like open job positions at Michael Hyatt Company, and you had to be in Nashville in order to join the team. Well, they're all remote now too. And talking about the adjustments that he made, and he said that they kind of did an experiment working 30 hours a week versus working 40 hours a week as a company. And what they found is that 30 hours a week, sometimes they're even more productive than they are when they're working 40.
Right.
So he mentioned this book, Shorter, by Alex Soo-Young Kim Pang, which I have one on my bookshelf that I read as a gap book called Rest, which I enjoyed. This one is basically about how you don't need to work as long in order to get the things done. And I feel like, well, number one, I'm excited about it because Michael Hyatt recommended it to me. I like this author already anyways, but I feel like this is a great follow-up to the one that we just read on how to be everything.
Yeah.
So if you're going to try to become a multipotentialite, I feel like this is another one of those books that at least could be like a key piece to figuring out that whole puzzle.
Sure. Yeah. At one point, I had a conversation with my specialist who's helped me with Lyme and mold and all of that, and was just talking about my ADD with her. She recommended cutting my workday down by 25% to force it, because it's like, okay, I have so many things I want to get done. If I were to cut the amount of time that I give myself to get them done, I don't have time for distractions, and it won't be an issue. It's like,
right.
Interesting, but I have never been able to get my employer to agree to that.
Exactly.
So
I'm hoping that this book is going to have a bunch of studies and numbers that potentially people could share and use as ammunition, maybe to fight for a shorter work day, work week, whatever.
There you go. Got any Gap books?
I do not at the moment. I feel like I'm getting back into a swing with reading though, so if I do get one started, I will bring it up on the next episode.
Cool. Awesome.
You got any Gap books?
I don't. Life. I think once I get through a season, but it's probably going to be through the end of the year before that season is completed. So,
sure.
That's what I know at the moment.
All right. Well, in that case, we can wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody who is a paying member of the Bookworm Club, the premium members who are willing to contribute a couple bucks a month to help us keep the lights on. It really means a lot. If you want to become a member, you can do so at bookworm.fm/membership. And that will get you, in addition to our undying gratitude, access to the mind map files that I take as I take notes on the books that we cover here. And a Bookworm wallpaper and some Gap Book episodes that Joe's recorded. Anything I'm missing?
I don't think so. There's a lot of cool stuff.
For $5 a month. So
I know.
bookworm.fm/membership.
Cool. Well, if you're reading along with us and you would like to join us in learning how to cut your house down, you can pick up The Minimalist Home by Joshua Becker, and we'll go through it with you in a couple weeks.